o'clock, so I will call this February 5th, 2024 meeting of the Westwood Select Board to order. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, on March 29, 2023, Governor Moore Healey signed into law an act making appropriations for the fiscal year 2023 to provide for supplementing certain existing appropriations and for certain other activities and projects. This act includes an extension until March 31, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions. This February 4, 2024 Select Board meeting will be conducted via remote participation by the board. I hereby grant permission to Westwood Media Center to record the meeting and to anyone else who wishes to record the meeting. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings, Chair of the Select Board. With me are my colleagues, Rob Gotti and Joe Previtera. Also with us are Chris Coleman, our Town Administrator, Molly Keene, Assistant Town Administrator and Director of Human Resources, Stephanie McManus, Assistant Town Administrator and Finance Director, Pat Ahern, Town Council, Tish Healy, Executive Assistant to the Town Administrator, and also with us is Alex Portillo from Westwood Media Center. Thank you very much, Alex, as always. With that, we'll move right into the chair's update. First, I'd like to share that last Saturday, January 27th, a dedication ceremony for Jill's House was held by the Westwood Housing Authority and WAHA, the Westwood Affordable Housing Associates, Inc., at the Gillette Meeting Room. The newly renovated home, which is owned by WAHA, was named to honor the late Juliet Onderdonk, who was an active and dynamic member of the Westwood community and a tireless advocate for affordable housing. Jill was a founding member of WAHA and the Westwood Housing Authority, and she was a pioneer, truly, in affordable housing, working for over 40 years at both the local and state level to achieve her mission of providing safe, functional, and affordable housing for all residents. The dedication was attended by members of Jill Onderdonk's family and her friends, as well as the joint boards of the Housing Authority and WAHA, and by Joe, Rob, and myself. It was truly a beautiful ceremony which honored Jill's legacy as a true and selfless neighbor and advocate in our community. Secondly, I would like to highlight, as we often highlight the great work of town staff, that the Westwood head of Library Adult Services, Molly Riportella, has used her experience and resources to create a grassroots organization called BiblioUnderground, whose mission is to turn the victims of domestic violence into survivors. And Fox 25 News recently aired a story on BiblioUnderground last week on January 30, and we are very proud of Molly's efforts to assist the survivors of domestic violence. And lastly, just a brief update on Fire Station 1. The request for qualifications, or RFQ, for the owner's project manager, or OPM, for the Fire Station 1 project was posted on January 24th, and on January 29th, a site visit for prospective OPM firms was held at Fire Station 1. RFQ responses are due on February 15th, with an anticipated execution of a contract in March of 2024, and we will keep you posted on this. With that, I will turn it over to Chris for the Town Administrator's update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two brief but exciting updates to inform the community. As some may know, Lieutenant Joe Vinci has left Westwood, and he's become the Chief of Police in the town of Dover. As part of that process, the town has promoted from Sergeant Mike Dalala to rank of Lieutenant on January 29th. Lieutenant Dalala was hired by the department on June 6th of 2011, He was promoted to the rank of sergeant on March 28th of 2018. We're very excited that Michael went through the process, was recommended for this position, and we're confident he's going to do very well. In addition, in the fire department, we have promoted Colin McCarthy to the rank of acting assistant fire chief effective February 4th, 2024. Mr. McCarthy was hired, or acting assistant chief McCarthy was hired by the department on March 21st, 2005, and was promoted to the rank of captain on February 5th of 2012. I want to correct one thing. I apologize. I misspoke. Lieutenant Delala was promoted to the rank of sergeant on May 28th of 2018. I believe I said March, so I apologize for that. And those are the two updates. We're very excited for these two individuals in these new leadership roles. We're confident they're going to do very well, and we're excited to help them in any way we can. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Chris. We will now move to scheduled action. We've got a lengthy agenda tonight, so we'll move through it as expeditiously as possible. Our first matter is a public hearing with respect to a petition for a conduit by Eversource. So I will first entertain a motion to open the public hearing. Rob, you're on mute.
My apologies, so moved.
Second.
And roll call, Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The hearing is now open. Mr. Ahern, I believe you may have an update for us on this.
I do. My understanding, Madam Chairman, is that Eversource is asked to pull this particular petition at this point in time. And they've asked that you take no action on it. That's at your discretion to do that. And it's at your discretion whether or not you want to take public comment.
Well, first, let me turn this over to my colleagues to see if you have any questions or comments.
None from me, Marianne.
Nor I.
I don't see the need for going forward if they are asking for the petition to be withdrawn. I will just give it a moment for public comment to the extent there may be any, as this is a public hearing, such as it is, and that will be entertaining a motion to close the hearing, given that the petition has been withdrawn. I'll just take this moment to remind folks that if you do make a comment tonight during our meeting, please, for all residents making comments, include your address so that we can read your comment. That said,
Point of order, Madam Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think you should vote. I think you should take a motion to allow them to withdraw and then close the hearing procedurally.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I will move that the select board allow Eversource to withdraw their petition for conduit on University Avenue at Dartmouth Street.
Second.
Roll call, Joe.
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
And I will further move to have the select board close the public hearing on here February 5th, 2024 for Eversource and their petition for conduit at University Avenue at Dartmouth Street.
Second.
Roll call, Joe.
Aye.
Rob.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Moving on, we have an update from WEAC, the Westwood Environmental Action Committee, on recycling. And I believe we have with us, I see Steve Hart.
Kate LaCroix as well, I believe.
I don't see her in here.
He's coming in right now.
Good evening, Mr. Hart.
Hello, everybody.
And welcome. And Ms. LaCroix, welcome. Good evening.
Hi, thank you. Good evening.
The floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you very much for having us. We won't take too much of your time. Tonight's meeting, I think, or our request to be at tonight's meeting came out of a discussion we had recently with the DPW. As part of WEAC's mission, we try to check in with the DPW regularly and do what we can to support their efforts in town. And I believe you as a board had seen the fabulous video that they put together starring Brendan Ryan in an amazing shower cap that was meant to draw the town's attention to our rising contamination rates in our recycling. So WEAC was kind of shocked to learn that those rates have gone up pretty dramatically in recent years. So we're now up around 17.6%. From about 9 just a few years ago. And as those rates go up, we risk incurring pretty steep fees from waste management. And we learned from DPW that those fees could be on the order of $25,000 a year. So certainly more than I expected. So the issue with the contamination is something I think what we believe is we can fix this. It's certainly something that if we get the word out to people in town, we can improve. So we were brainstorming with DPW sort of creative ways to get that message out because it's a pretty crowded media environment. It's kind of hard to get people's attention. So especially if there's a piece of information they don't know they need. So we had a couple of ideas and DPW thought it best that we run it by the select board to kind of get your input. So the first one, in addition to all the regular channels such as Westwood Wire, social media, Council on Aging, maybe even trying to get the schools to put it in their newsletters. We were hoping to try to use the Alert Westwood communication channel to do a one-time email blast to everyone on that list, just to give them a quick rundown of the contamination issue and what they can do to fix it. We checked in with Brian Camp about this, who, as I understand, is in charge of the Alert Westwood system. And his thinking was that it probably would not be appropriate to use the phone call feature of it or the text feature, but that he thought an email could be appropriate. And again, this would be a one-time thing. So that's the first idea that we wanted to present. And I don't know if anyone has any questions about that.
I think it's a great idea.
I'm assuming you would embed a link to Brendan's fantastic video.
Yeah. Yeah,
Great.
we could embed that. We could also embed the fantastic list of recycling A to Z that Steve Hart has been working on. We're trying to also put out the word to folks about what they can do to get rid of sort of difficult to get rid of items that can't go in the regular recycling. You know, you have a piece of furniture, you have a mattress, you have, you know, random stuff that you don't know how to get rid of. We're trying to create a list of resources that people can access for where to bring things. And so Steve's been working really hard on that. So yeah, we can include a few useful links in that email blast. The second idea is a little bit more complicated, and I've been having a lot of conversations with DPW, waste management via DPW, and also our municipal assistance coordinator named Missy Hollenbeck. She's extremely helpful. All towns in the state have a municipal assistance coordinator, and their job is basically to help us deal with issues like this. We had come up with the idea of ordering and applying informational stickers. They're sort of like bumper sticker size. You may have seen them on barrels, maybe if you lived in another town at some point. But basically the stickers give a very quick reminder to people as they're looking at the barrel, here's what can and can't go in this barrel. And in fact, in many towns, the barrels come from waste management with the stickers already on them. But in Westwood, that's not the case. So we were looking at how could we order and distribute those stickers. We were hopeful that waste management might be able to give us the stickers, but it turns out that that's not an option. So we are going to need to find funding for the stickers, and the estimated cost is somewhere between $3,500 and $5,500 to print the stickers for the number that we would need. So WEAC doesn't have sort of a consistent stream of funds coming into its budget, so we would need to get creative about where to find that money. But that's kind of on the back burner at the moment. The issue, I think, tonight is whether the select board feels it would be sort of appropriate for a volunteer force to apply stickers to residents' recycling barrels. I'll just say that we would certainly never think about going on anyone's private property. This would only happen when the barrels were out at the curb for regular pickup. And I would also say that I discovered, because I thought this might come up, that the barrels are the property of the town of Westwood. They don't belong to residents. So I would just ask if anyone has any questions about that and how that might work.
I do. I think you answered one of them, Kate. I was going to ask, what would be the distribution method? So you're talking about having a volunteer group be able to go out on collection day and actually apply these directly onto the barrels themselves.
Right.
And I guess one of the questions that I have is, do the stickers themselves, do they address some of the most common problems?
Yes.
I'm not familiar. I've never seen one before.
Well, I sent one to Tish today as a screenshot. Tish, I don't know if we have a way to show the board that. I also have another version that I don't know if I'm allowed to screen share, but I have another version I could show you if you're interested in seeing it.
They have several
yes.
varieties, and one has, the big hitter is plastic bags. So one has plastic bags very large, and then it has the next 2 or 3 big hitters under that.
Yeah, and you can customize them for the contaminants that are the biggest problem in your town. But certainly, based on what we've learned from DPW, plastic bags are a huge one. So yeah, it would be, as I said, bumper sticker size. It would address the things that are the most problematic. Yeah, it shows it right there underneath permanent recycling bin labels.
So
that's a sample.
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I love the idea, and there's nothing like the immediacy of that before you go to put something in it.
Right.
One question I have is, I'm under the impression, I could be wrong, that some folks may own some of the barrels if they've asked for extra barrels, in which case they may own them and not the town. So I would just want that issue to be vetted. In other words, I wouldn't want anyone getting into the situation where someone is complaining that their private property has
Sure.
so that's just one issue I want to raise.
Yeah, I will check on that. My understanding is that if the barrel says waste management, that it's the property of the town. But I will certainly double check that.
I have one other question. Kate, in the conversations that you've had, whether it was with the resource person that you were speaking of, or maybe anybody from any other community, have we seen any other communities that have had some type of rise like this, and was, a public education effort really effective in helping reduce that?
I have not researched that specifically. Honestly, it's been taking quite a bit of time just to figure out how we would go about doing this, and whether it was okay, and where to get the stickers, and what would the stickers say, and how much do they cost. So I have not researched that specifically, but I do know from Missy Hollenbeck, the municipal assistance coordinator, that my understanding from her is these kinds of efforts can make a difference. The best is, of course, to do many different channels of information, getting the information out there at once. So this would just be one arm of that, but I think the immediacy, as Marianne was saying, the immediacy of seeing it right there on your barrel lid, that's kind of what we were going for. So.
Okay.
Joe, any comments,
Just-
questions?
One, I think you clarified it, Kate, that it's going on top of the barrel, correct?
Yeah, I think right where you would lift it.
Yeah. And the other comment was, this might be right for an Eagle project. I'm not sure, but you might want to reach out to some of the scout leaders in town and see if it's possible. I'm not sure.
It just so happens my husband is one of the scout leaders. So yes, I think that's a great idea. Actually, Missy had mentioned having scouts help out with this project. The only hesitation I had there was she mentioned something about insurance. So I wasn't sure. I'd have to look more into that. I just want to make sure that anybody who'd be out there helping us volunteering would be safe. But yes, that's a great point.
Yeah, and the other point would be, it might not be ideal for the scouts to do it on trash day, but going door to door in their neighborhoods, folks are generally pretty welcoming to the scouts.
It's true. Yep.
Well, I think, oh, go ahead, Joe.
No, I'm good. Thanks, Marianne.
I think this is a tremendous effort, and you've obviously put a great deal of time, effort, and thought into this, and we really appreciate that. This is a really important initiative, and I do think that education just will help. I mean, I learned things, or things were reinforced for me in watching the video, and you almost can't hear it enough times. So I think it would be great, just to look into those issues about the ownership of the barrels, so that we're not affronting anyone's property rights. And thank you so much for what you're doing. Very important.
You're welcome. And
Madam Chair,
if
one
it's like,
last-
yeah,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go
Just
ahead, Rob.
one last question. Do we know whether from Todd, Brendan, or in your conversations? So we've gotten to roughly 17, almost 18%, which is sort of double where things were. What threshold do we have to get below in order to have that cost avoidance of the 25K that you highlighted?
I don't actually know that number. Steve, did you remember that number from our conversation?
I don't recall the exact number. It could have been 10, but I'm not sure about that. We'd have to ask Todd
Yeah.
and Brendan.
Thank you, guys.
And I just wondered if the select board had any thoughts on, so the funding is, something we need to explore, obviously. If the select board had any thoughts on sources for that funding that WEAC might be able to apply for. Or if you come up with ideas, maybe let me know later.
I can't say that I do offhand, although I would think a grassroots effort would quickly get you to that. I mean, if you were able to get an email out to folks that asking them to share it, I think you could pretty quickly get to that goal in Westwood.
It's a good thought. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, point of order, there's one comment you might want to read into
Oh,
that.
thank you. I didn't see that. Thanks, Pat. Could I ask the person to please include their address so that we can read your comment? For everybody, including a comment, please include your address, because our policy is not to read comments unless we've got an address, and I would like to read it.
Madam Chair, there's also another person with their hand up in the attendee list. So if maybe they would put their question into the comment as well, and heed your advice by including their address, that'd be great.
Thank you. Again, can you please add your address, Claire? Sorry, I do want to just give this a moment because I'd like to read the comments. There we go. Comment from Claire Galkowski, 320 Dover Road. No worries. She writes, I believe it's 10%, which is the question that was asked earlier. And then she writes, a resident commented that she has been buying recycling plastic bags at the store for years and bagging her recyclables. She was horrified. Can the town request that local retailers not sell these? That's a very interesting question. Mr. Ahern?
You're on mute, Pat.
Sorry about that. That's something I'd want to research. You're kind of getting into the market at that point in time, and you have somewhat limit on how much you can affect the market without, say, a town bylaw being passed at town meeting to prevent that from happening. So I think that's a bigger undertaking than, I mean, you can request anything, whether or not you can enforce it's the issue.
Can we have Todd or Brendan maybe find out, is such a thing actually a thing, right? Meaning, are there bags that are permissible to be recycled, and what's the distinction of those bags relative to those that are contaminating the waste stream?
Sure.
All right. Well, thank you both very much for being here tonight for this update and for all of the very important work that you're doing.
You're welcome.
You do, Madam Chairman, you do have someone with their hand up, but they've not identified themselves in the attendees.
Okay, well, I don't see a comment.
And Madam Chair,
Yes.
Ms. Galkowski elaborates further that no plastic bags at all can go in the carts. Thank you, Claire.
Yep, thank you, Rob. Well, I think we should move on then. And again, thank you very much for being here tonight, both of you.
Great.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Moving on with scheduled action. Next, we have a request from Cino, 569 High Street, for the extension of exercise of license date. And with us is Nora Loughnane, our Director of Community and Economic Development. Good evening, Nora. And we also have with us Ken, is it Kusan? Mr. Kusan. Anyone else, Nora?
I believe that's it tonight. I think that's it, right? There's no one else joining you, Ken, is there?
Correct.
All right.
Well, welcome
So-
to both.
Thank you. So just to give everyone just a brief update on this, Cino came to the select board back in October. Well, they came with a license application, began in July, finalized it in October. And they received an alcohol license approval from the select board at that time. That had to go to the ABCC for approval, and it was approved by the ABC in December of 2023. In the meantime, they applied for a I'm sorry, I'm losing the reissuance of the license for the next year, an extension of the license for 2024, and they were granted that as well. Now, the situation was a little bit odd. In July of 2023, when the attorney representing Cino first came to the town's licensing agent, they explained what they wanted to do, and they explained that it was unlikely that the new restaurant would be able to open until 2024. And Karen Flynn, our licensing agent, explained that there was no need to apply for a license in 2023 at the cost of $5,000 for a license that would never be used, and encouraged them to apply in 2024 instead. For whatever reason, the attorney decided to push forward with that. Karen at that time let them know that there were dates that were associated with the issuance of a license, and that a license had to be exercised in a certain period of time. 45 days from the date of the actual issuance by the ABCC, the applicant must exercise the license. And to do that, they must begin renovations of the property that the license is issued for, and then they must actually have that the property in full operation within 4 months of the date of that license. So as those dates approach, the 45 days was actually this past February 3rd. As that date was approaching, Karen Flynn got in touch with Cino representatives to let them know that, this was a concern that, as was discussed with her attorney back in July and again in September and October, we were going to run out of time, and they had yet to file for a demolition permit or any permit to do work. So at that time, I believe Ken was only first made aware of this deadline that was approaching. And he looked into it and said there was just no way they could have their building permit application filed in time to meet the February 3rd deadline. So Karen put this on your agenda, requested this to be put on your agenda to discuss tonight whether the select board would be willing to grant an extension of the approval to allow Cino to move forward at a slower time frame. And the suggestion is that if the select board is interested in doing this, that they would agree to an extension with the understanding that the demolition permit for work to be done in the building has to be applied for no later than April 15th, and that a certificate of occupancy to open the restaurant actually would occur no later than August 31st. So it's the recommendation that the select board consider granting that extension with those conditions.
Thank you, Nora. Mr. Cuson, anything that you'd like to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Select Board. We appreciate you hearing our request. As was just described, there obviously was some misunderstanding in our license application. We would have waited until 24. We spent $5,000 that we really didn't need to. But at this point, we're anxious to move forward. We've been cautious to make sure that the plans that we put forth to the Department of Health and to the building official be accurate and represent exactly what we want to do. So we've been pretty just been really making sure that everything that we're ready to submit will be accurate. So as described, we're hoping to have our plans completed by the end of this month and bid proposals in by the end of March, which would allow us to put in for a demolition permit by the required April 15th.
Is it your expectation that you'd be in a position to obtain the certificate of occupancy by the end of August? Wonderful. Well, we've seen the design documents. I will say that the community is excited for Bar Cino to come to Westwood, especially for those of us who've been to your other restaurants in other communities. It's a beautiful concept and great food, if I do say so myself. So we are very much looking forward to your opening. I will turn this over to my colleagues for any questions or comments you may have.
I think, Madam Chair, you covered the one that I was concerned about is, there is another date that is a contingency on this. And can you feel confident that if you apply for your demolition permit by the April 15th deadline, that the renovations and the opening will be able to be met by that second date?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. I have, no concern extending the date. They've already unfortunately had to pay an additional $5,000 that they shouldn't have. That should probably be enough pain for them to have to suffer.
Marion, the only comment I had was along the same lines as Rob. I never thought supply chain would pertain to auto parts, but I learned that today. So Ken, you're pretty confident there won't be any supply chain issues with your the equipment you need?
No, so we suffered that challenge in Watertown, and that took quite a while to get that restaurant built. But we're confident that the mechanical components that we're ready to install will be available to us. So that's a very good question, and we're painfully aware of supply chain issues.
Yeah, muffler. Jeez, give me a break. Okay, I'm all set, Marianne.
Terrific. Well, I think we are ready for a motion on this.
Okay, I move the Select Board grant an extension to the exercise of license date requirement in the rules and regulations governing alcohol beverages for Bar Cino Westwood LLC, doing business as Bar Cino, to April 15th, 2024, with the following condition: that a representative for Bar Cino must apply for a demolition permit and/or a building permit by April 15th, 2024, and obtain a certificate of occupancy on or before August 31st, 2024. If the applicant determines that obtaining a certificate of occupancy by August 31st is not attainable, prior to the date of the exercise of license extension date expiring, the applicant must return to the board for a status update and an additional extension request.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call. Joe?
Here it is.
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Nora, thank you very much. And Mr. Kusan, good luck. Thanks for being here tonight. We look forward to your opening.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we can move on to our next agenda item, which is a financial update and discussion of the FY25 budget with our Finance Director, Steph McManus. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, just do a presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, it's showing on my other screen. I'm trying to figure out how to pull it over.
No worries.
Steph, switch.
Yeah.
So if you go to, there should be,
I know, I thought it was under view, Rob. I do this. I've done this before. You know what, if I can't, I'll just go through it as a PDF. It's no problem.
do you have somewhere where you're seeing any notes or anything that's on your other screen?
Can you see this? I'll just do a PDF.
No, just put it, go back there. Go back to your, see the lower down, lower right, you can see there's like a little slide screen there to the right of that one. One more.
Yep, that's what I did. It's showing on my second screen. That's okay.
Okay.
No problem. I'll just do the PDF. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Here we go. Okay, so just to recap, at the January 22nd Select Board meeting, I had presented a preliminary FY25 overall budget, had gone through all the revenue sources, projected expenditures, and at that time, I was just showing that we were resulting in a little over about $1 million budget gap between our expenditures, projected expenditures and revenue sources. So the goal of this meeting tonight is to just update you on where we are now on the overall budget, and then giving some details on the municipal budget and changes that have happened there, and the overall, the operating budget and any changes that have happened there. And then also to hear from the Select Board and get approval on this budget as presented to move forward to the next step. So the proposed FY25 municipal budget book, which is drafted every year, has been submitted to the Select Board for review. That's what we'll be going over tonight. This includes information that I presented at the last meeting and any updates that I will have in this presentation. Hard copies of that book will be distributed later this week, including to the FinCom. We are currently finalizing the FY25 proposed overall budget book, which has all information again that's been already presented or that I will update on tonight. And those will also be distributed later this week. I will then be presenting the overall budget to the FinCom at their February 12th meeting. And the positive to come out of this is that the budget as being presented tonight is currently balanced. A quick update on assessments. I throw this in every meeting, and I will probably for the next month or two, just to keep you updated on where we are on those figures that we sort of have no control over. They're assessments that come from other places that we have to add into our budget. So right now, we are still waiting for an assessment from the Blue Hills Regional School. So there's no update on that. I'm currently projecting a 10% increase over FY24. That could come in under, it could come in over. So that's what's included right now, and that is within the total school budget. On the sewer department side, for the MWRA, we also don't have an assessment number definite on that just yet. It should come in at the end of February. We're currently projecting a 3.5% increase over FY24, and we were given guidance on that number. And just to be clear on this one, it will have no overall budget impact. It will just be adjusted on both the revenue expenditure side in the final budget. For health insurance, again, I don't have an update on this number, but just to keep you on where we are, I don't have a final number from the GIC. However, when I presented the budget at the January 22nd meeting, we were estimating a 9.6% increase. We're usually conservative with the increase on this number just because we're not sure what it could be. Also, we are given some guidance from the GIC in their December meeting when they present what they're expecting on their side for rate increases. and they were presenting between an 8 and 10% increase. We have since reduced that to a current 8% increase over FY24. So the budget for the health insurance cost on both school and municipal side is $8.35 million. I had said in a previous meeting that was going to be more like 8.45. So we've just reduced that estimate. Again, this isn't a final number, but as I'll go through tonight, and you can see, this is one of the strategies we took to get to that balanced budget, just decreasing what we're estimating for the health insurance costs. And as soon as we get the final numbers on that, the fixed cost budget will be updated to reflect the actual. Good news, we did receive FY25 preliminary state aid revenue numbers from the governor's budget. This is an important number for us. It's 6.6% of our total revenue budget for FY25. So it was released. We've included all of these updates in our current budget as it stands. So as you can see, that overall change, the really important line is right here. So total revenue for FY24 was just over 8 million. That was the year we got that large increase, which was great for the town at the time. For FY25, that projected number from the governor's budget as proposed is now 8.1 million, $108,000 increase, which equates to a 1.3% change over FY24. And I'm just going to stop for a minute to make sure no one has questions on this, because this is sort of new information. I had been level funding this budget up until now. I've now plugged in the actuals. So that's an extra $108,000 we had on the revenue side, again, helping us to close that gap.
Thanks.
I have one question on the slide prior.
Sure.
You know, with respect to the Blue Hills assessment, you're holding a 10% increase in there, but you haven't gotten that officially from them. And that's included in the school budget. I always struggle where we're bound by Prop 2.5 and somebody else can shove 10% at us. Do you have line of sight to how they create their assessment?
No, it's a great question. They say they base it on, they also go by the governor's budget that comes out. So they use that and then also see how many Westwood students are currently enrolled or that they're projecting to have enrolled. So last year when I presented this number, it was about a 28% increase, which was large. That was not a normal year. Our enrollment on the Westwood side went from 6 students to 8. So it's sort of something we don't have much control over. It's what they assess us on. And I think they have to look at also all communities that are involved in this. And they sort of, like we do with taxes, they have to spread it out over everyone. So it's sort of just based on at that time enrollment of all communities involved.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm just going to do some high level steps, and please, if anyone has any questions on these, but how we got to our current balanced budget. So as I said, there was about $1 million gap when I had presented this previously at the beginning of January. The expenditure budget projected at that time was 123.3 million. And on the revenue side for projected revenues, we were at 122.3 million. So for tonight's update, it is currently balanced. Expenditures and revenues both are projected at 122.8 million. So as you can see, just by looking at the numbers, we both brought down our expenses and then also increased wherever we could for our projected revenues and then any actuals that came in, such as state aid. So on the municipal side, which is within our operating budget, there is now an increase of 5.08. We were projecting an increase of 6.5% at your last presentation. So just some steps taken to get to this balanced budget. We reduced the municipal expense budget within general government. And when we say general government, that does not include what we call our frontline services. So DPW, our libraries, things like that. We just wanted to look at where we could cut any expense budgets that sort of our residents would not feel firsthand. So it's within our admin and general government funds. We went through everywhere we could possibly cut and came up with $80,000 that we could reduce. We also partially funded the select board reserve account with free cash. Currently, it is budgeted at $355,000. $155,000 of that for FY25 will come from free cash and the remainder from taxation as it has in the past. There's precedent for this. We recently switched the FinCom reserve account to be funded with free cash. We also reduced the fixed cost budget overall. Like I said, we reduced our estimate for GIC. We also cut in a few places. So overall, that fixed cost budget, which is within our operating budget, was reduced by $325,000. We had originally presented a budget with a increased local receipts revenue projection of $300,000 over FY24. We're now upping that to $400,000 for FY25. So that's another $100,000 that we added onto the revenue side. Like I said, state aid was also updated, which was a great boost for us, $108,000 over FY24. That was added on the revenue side. And then finally, the only things we're adding to this year's budget, we are still keeping the 2 firefighter positions that we had included. We were originally projecting trying to increase the overtime budget for that department by $400,000. It is now budgeted at $100,000. So just $300,000 less than we were originally proposing. And these were the steps. It was a long process, but we really tried to look hard at creating a sustainable budget, what we could move forward with without cutting any services that residents frontline feel. And then also on the revenue side, increasing anywhere we could while still maintaining our conservative projections to make sure that we can keep up with what we're saying we bring in for revenues. And you already saw most of these charts and pies at the last meeting. I just plugged in where we are with the current numbers. So on the municipal budget side, like I said, there's that 5.1% increase that it's now at instead of the 6.5%. It's at 24.8 million. And here's the breakdown of the different categories within that, the different departments. Talked about general government. Public safety is obviously the largest increase at 6.7%. 5.4% of that is for the fire department and 1.3% is for the police. Another large increase is public works. A large portion of that is because they are adding an HVAC technician position, but they are also cutting their expenses by that same amount to make it a net neutral increase. A net add. And a little bit more detail on that just to show, and I know we look at this a lot, but we really are driven in the municipal budget by salaries. The school is very similar. 82% of that total overall budget is dedicated to employees and their salaries. The major changes, I've just updated this from the last time we presented to you. We are now, this first line is still the same, that contractual obligations that we are required to adhere to for our COLA and step increases of $769,000. The addition of the 2 new firefighter positions, both at $75,000 for a total of $150,000, plus an increase of $100,000 on the overtime budget side. And then that HVAC technician position that I just mentioned, which is offset by a decrease to the expense side. So it was $110,000 decrease on the expense side on contracted services in order to fit in that new HVAC tech position and just bring it more in-house. So that's overall a $1.2 million increase on the municipal side, and 100% of that is for salaries, which is really all included right here for an explanation. On the operating budget, so that includes municipal, but it also includes the school budget, Blue Hills, as I talked about, fixed costs, debt service, and sewer. That is now a 3.4% increase. So this is just updated numbers for you. So our total operating budget is at $116 million for FY25 as proposed. And like I said, we are still waiting for certain assessments, which will be included in this and updated whenever I receive those, including health insurance, Blue Hills assessment, and the MWRA assessment.
Steph, before you leave this slide.
Yep.
Do I recall correctly that the fixed cost had previously been budgeted at a 5.3% increase? And, you know, can you highlight where that delta comes from?
That's correct. Yep. So about $100,000 of that decrease was due to our new GIC projection at 8% instead of 9.6%. We also have our waste and recycling budget, which is largely contracted services within there. We were projecting a pretty significant increase there just due to the recycling issues that have been occurring. We cut that back by $50,000. We then evaluated certain items in there that could be funded through free cash that are sort of reserve funds, as we call them, and we plugged that wherever possible. So that's really brought it down on the fixed cost side as much as we possibly could.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Again, this is just a very high level chart with updated numbers. Nothing too new here. It's just plugging in everything I just talked about. Operating budget, total right here is 116. And then just our other appropriations that we do, such as the stabilization account, OPEB, capital items, everything coming to that $122.8 million number that I started off with. So on the expenditure side, this number matches what's on the revenue side. So that 122.8. So everything here for revenue, the big changes here were our local receipt estimate just increasing by 400,000. We plugged for state aid, so that number is now more accurate as it goes through the process. And then utilizing free cash in certain areas, like I said, with the select board reserve. And this is sort of just a high level version of everything I just talked about. So just to break it down and one more time go through. On the operating budget side, the school budget is at a 3.7, municipal budget's at a 5.1, fixed costs are at a 4.5. The base capital, nothing has changed since I updated you on the capital slides on the 8th for the base capital. All supplemental categories are the same as well. The townwide projects that we were suggesting be funded with meals and hotel tax. The two items are acoustic tiles at the pool, as well as generator updates, upgrades and replacements at municipal buildings. The sewer capital improvement, which is funded with sewer retained earnings, and then the ambulance capital that is funded with ambulance receipts. So nothing there has changed. Our liabilities and reserves have not changed. We're still appropriating $125,000 to the stabilization fund from free cash, and then that $1.565 million contribution to OPEB trust fund from taxation, which is keeping on target with our required funding policies. There is one update that I'll go into next on the capital side. It's specific to borrowing. So we had presented on the 8th that there were two projects requiring borrowing. It was the fire department squad vehicle and the high school roof restoration. And if you'd like me to go back and answer any questions on those or provide more detail, I'm happy to. There is a third project that has come up. This was always in the 5-year capital budget. It was originally submitted as an FY26 request. We are looking to move this up and actually add it as a third borrowing article on the FY25 upcoming annual town meeting. This is a project that it's Conant Road culvert construction at 1.5 million. And again, we're just looking to move it up 1 year. And as some background, town meeting in 2022 authorized the design fund portion of this project for $200,000. Like I said, it was originally in the 5-year capital plan for FY26. In discussions with the DPW director, he has applied, which is great news, for a hazard mitigation federal grant. And if approved, the town will receive a 75% reimbursement grant for this project. And in order to take advantage of the opportunity, we're recommending this project be moved up to a borrowing article for FY25. This project consists of upgrading existing pipe sizes with 2 culverts along Conant Road and Country Lane. The current drainage is inadequate, which I think we've experienced a little bit of recently with the storms, is causing a rising level of water threatening homes along Conant Road, as well as the sewer department's active pump station. So upsizing the pipes with the 2 existing culverts will significantly decrease the water levels in those neighborhoods. And again, I'm just going to add so the overall proposed budget is currently balanced. And then I'll go into quickly what I just referenced for the additional capital articles, that there are now 3 being suggested to the board that they add as borrowing articles. And here are those 3. Like I said, the fire truck, the school roof restoration, and the DPW culvert construction project, which would total about $4.7 million. And if the board saw to move these forward, I would recommend this being voted in the next agenda item, and that these 3 projects would become budget articles 11 through 13. And just next steps. So the February meetings, I will continue to update you on the FY25 budget as far as any local revenue sources that have come in updated, if state aid changes at all, any assessments, capital projects. But the next step here is really to hear from the board tonight. This is the budget as it's being presented to you, balanced from the town administrator and the finance director. and just to have the board's approval to move this forward to the next step, which would be releasing the municipal budget document to the FinCom, and then also drafting and releasing the overall budget summary book and presenting on that budget to FinCom on February 12th. And then just a reminder to everyone watching that we will be at the FinCom public hearing on February 27th presenting the warrant articles. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Stephanie, thank you very much. Clearly, there's been a huge amount of work that has gone into this, particularly in closing the budget gap that we talked about at our last meeting. I do want to highlight that as this board has discussed now for a number of months, that it has been our priority to raise the service level at the fire department as far as the number of firefighters. And this budget does make significant progress toward that. I'm hoping that you and Chris perhaps could talk about the efforts made to do that and the constraints as well.
Yep, so there has been a lot of effort made to increase everything we possibly could in this budget for FY25 on the fire department side. It does include 2 full-time positions, 2 new firefighter positions, their base salaries and what's included in that, as well as the first increase to overtime that has happened in a number of years. And it's just the town showing that they're, as the board said, it's a priority to start investing in this. It's the only addition we've had to the budget this year. Every other place and expenses were either level funded or possibly even cut. We looked at every revenue source possible to go beyond that. It's just what we can sustainably add at this time.
Yeah, and just to add on, so first of all, Stephanie, I thought you've done a great job. I mean, this budget gap was much larger than 1,067,000. So she's, I mean, to bring it down to where she has to a proposed balanced budget that's sustainable, she should be commended on. The other thing is, Marianne and the board, and for all those listening, we view our job as proposing a proposed balanced budget to the board. But this is the board's budget. So if the board wants to move things around, that's the board's discretion to do so. We can certainly, especially if asked, we can certainly advise you or share with you what your suggestions may impact us, how it may impact us later, if it's legal or if it's feasible to do so. But ultimately, this is the board's budget. Like I said, we think our job is to present to you, the 3 of you, a proposed balanced, sustainable budget. But again, ultimately, this is your budget to pass on to the FinCom.
Thank you, Chris. Let me open this up to my colleagues for questions or comments you may have.
I have several. Joe, do you want to go first? I know this is your first time through sort of the whole budget process. So you want to...
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Full disclosure, I thought the board would have a little more input into this. I had asked Chris back in December about when you gave me, and Stephanie, by the way, you did a great job on this. I really appreciate it. I'm trying not to mess it up. But the fact of the matter is that during the summer, I got a number of requests from people about having yard waste pickup during the summertime. I was impressed with the number of folks that did. And then I realized that most of these folks were seniors, with the exception of one person who was a very avid gardener. And they asked about if we could get yard waste pickup in the summertime. And I said I would put that forward. Chris, you and I spoke, as I said, and then I asked you about the operational budget discussions, and you said that would be in January. Perhaps I misunderstood exactly what you meant by that. I thought we'd have some input into it. And I think you knew I think I told you where I was headed with this, looking for the yard waste pickups. I'm not sure if you and Todd discussed that or what your thoughts were on that. Stephanie, in order to keep that budget balance because you work so hard on it. I told you I'd sharpen my pencil this week, and I'm sorry, I'm so glad, Chris, thanks for calling and reminding me about this. I thought we could reduce the snow and ice budget by whatever, 30, is it $35,000 or something like that, and use that for the yard and waste pickup that the seniors are asking for, which I don't think is unreasonable. For many of them, it's their hobby after they retire. Chris, you said something to me about we could not touch the snow and ice budget, and I explained to you that I got some help with this from outside. It looks like, I can tell you, it's definitely trending down. And the 2 years I mentioned to you, Chris, were not expending any, but no additional fund transfer. That was in 2012, 2020. I was thinking, well, if this is trending down, maybe we can do something. We know there'll always be yard waste pickup in the summertime. I was hoping we could try to work something into this budget or shuffle some things to get some yard waste pickup for folks.
So the snow and ice account is an interesting one. Sorry, Chris, did you want to jump in, or can I?
Well, actually,
I'll
I have a question, right? That snow and ice is funded by, one-time funds, and our financial policies are not to fund ongoing operations with one-time sources.
Yeah, so I think what Joe's referring to is we have snow and ice money budgeted within DPW through taxation, a baseline budget, and then if it's an interesting account, I say, because towns can incur expenditures in excess of available appropriations. It's one of the only accounts we can do that for. Basically, you can deficit spend it, and at the end of the year, if we do that and we need available funds, we go through an Article 1 request to the FinCom reserve, which, Joe, that's probably what you're referencing when we say we haven't spent anything in the last couple of years. It's from the FinCom reserve because we've handled it within the budget. I say you should probably not touch it. And then I also say legally it could be a huge problem. There are conditions that must be met in order to allow us to deficit spend that account for snow and ice. And the requirement is, and this is set by the state, it's a Mass General law, that the current year's budget for snow and ice equal or exceed the prior year fiscal budget for it. So say we cut it for next year and it was a terrible winter, we legally would not be allowed to overspend that budget, which would be a huge problem. And we are also required to report to DOR every September on the data for what we did and what we're spending.
So
Pat looks like he has a comment, which I would love to hear.
So when I first got on the select board years ago, Joe, we were budgeting at the 1978 level for snow and ice removal. And it stayed there until probably 2015, 2016. And we had to increase it at that point in time because when we budgeted in 1978, the cost of gas was 30 cents a gallon. And it was certainly more than that in 2015. So we increased it to its current level. I agree with Stephanie that if you reduce it, you create problems from a legal perspective. Also, if you have a very bad winter and you haven't expended your allotted amount, you aren't allowed to get state aid and the state aid will jump in like in 2015 and give towns additional monies to help cover the unexpected cost of snow and ice removal. So you got to be pretty careful in what you're doing with that. But I agree with you. We've had some good years, but I don't think winter's going away, unfortunately. And I wish it would personally, but I don't think it's going away.
Yeah, and just for Marianne and Rob, I'm not wedded to the snow and ice budget. I just didn't want to throw the balanced budget that Stephanie put together out of whack. I'm not privy to all the rules and conditions.
No, I'm merely trying to give you an explanation.
Oh, no, I'm learning. I'm getting the picture here, but I'm just curious what Rob and Marianne think about the folks who are requesting this. Is this something we can do something about?
Well, we spent the weekend going through line by line the municipal budget. Was there a particular place that you wanted to cut?
I'm sorry, Rob. suggested the snow and ice budget, and now I just got an education as to why we can't do it. I'm sorry I wasn't privy to the line by line this weekend, or I would have participated to get the yard and waste into it.
Did you not
So
get?
I sent the PDF out to the select board. And
So-
just a little
So I guess
background.
my question though is we're trying to close a gap and this is extending the gap. So the snow and ice is not a recommended source for funding that. Was there something else somewhere else that you were desirous of cutting?
To be honest with you, Rob, I didn't spend a lot of time on it. I saw the snow and ice as what I thought to be an opportunity. If I was privy to all the rules and conditions, or if we had gotten this rolling before tonight, I think I could have done a better job on it. I guess I dropped the ball on it.
Joe,
If I could, can I say something?
Go ahead, Chris.
Can I say something? So Joe, I hear what you're saying, and I think there may be a way, maybe not in fiscal year 25, but I can certainly have a conversation with the director. He actually suggested this earlier this evening, which is to try to see if we can work with our vendor and possibly have an extension on the contract and see if we can work in an additional pickup that may not cost $17,000 per pickup. So he's certainly willing to see if we can do something and redo an agreement with them to see if we can do that additional pickup. But I know I shared this with you earlier, or some of this information, but the town did do an analysis of brush and yard waste. And I think back in 2014, they stopped collecting yard waste in August. And then in 2020, they stopped collecting in July. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't do a reassessment and a reevaluation of it. But we might be able to do something. Maybe if the board wants to do something in fiscal year 25, we'll certainly do what the board wants. But Joe, I think we can work with the DPW director to try to address the concerns that you're raising and see if there's something we can do more sustainably with the contract and trying to redo the contract with that vendor. We can at least try.
All right, so help. I think that's terrific, Chris. Thanks for reaching out to Todd. Again, I'll just reiterate that Marianne, I didn't want to bring this up tonight. I wanted to get this squared away beforehand, which is why I asked earlier, Rob. And then what I didn't learn about a lot of this till I met with Stephanie and Chris. So I guess Chris, if we can move forward with discussing this with Todd, I'd certainly appreciate that effort on your part and on Todd's part, because I think it's something that the seniors in town would appreciate.
We can certainly do that.
I know the director, Todd, he's such a creative person with this, and he's always willing to discuss that budget we're discussing, which would be waste removal and recycling, which is within fixed costs. We actually already pulled that back by $50,000. So he's already not really even being funded in that account at what he's projecting out he needs. That was already cut back. So this would be something that if we were going to add to that budget, I would prefer to give it back in areas he's already requested that he needs.
Okay. And Rob, to answer your question, when in the future, if residents ask me about certain opportunities, when should I put those on the table?
I think you should do that as early as October, right? When we begin the process. Each year, the chair runs the budget steering process with Chris and Stephanie and the respective folks from the other side on the school side of things. So next year, that'll be something that you'll be doing. So you'll know, and you'll have more familiarity with how the process works from an iterative, standpoint. There's a lot that you start with, as Marianne knows from having done it this year, at the beginning where you've got all the requests and you've got more than we've got the ability to fund. And so there's a lot of, discussions that have to happen between Chris and Stephanie and directors of departments to get us down to close the gaps. Sometimes there are gaps that are driven on the school side of things with respect to special education, as was the case last year. This year, we have a whole lot more on the public safety side. So those are things that as you get into, what it takes to bring it to the balanced budget, you'll live that firsthand next year.
Okay.
I think we probably need to move on from this point, but I do just have a couple quick questions. Chris, first of all, for you, how many pickups, collections are we doing currently?
Pursuant to our website, it looks like there's at least 10 weeks that we collect right now. During the analysis that was done prior to my arrival, there appeared to be a greater need later, or additional pickups needed, or at least one pickup during the month of November, because sometimes Westwood will experience a late fall, a late time with leaves falling and things like that. And so that's how they shifted it. But right now we have about 10 weeks, which we pick up. We do not pick up during the month of July and August, but we do pick up. I have it here for you. Hold on one second. We do pick up for 24. We pick up 1 week in April, 1 week in May, 1 week in June, 1 week in September. We begin pickups 3 weeks in October, and then we finish out with pickups that begin with 3 weeks in November. So right now that looks like a total of 11. Excuse me, 10. Excuse me.
I got 4 on November, Chris.
Well, one began October 28th and ended on November 1st. And then the next one, pursuant to the website, began on November 11th.
Okay.
And on November 18th and November 25th.
All right.
And just as a follow-up, Joe, and again, I think we need to move on from this point, but this is the first time I'm hearing that residents have voiced a concern with this. And I'm just wondering how many residents have directly expressed this to you.
Oh, I'd say probably about 10 people. One young person, the rest are all seniors.
Just
Madam
wondering.
Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Say something. With all due respect, Joe has shared this with me. He did share this with me in advance. There's nothing that, Joe did do what he needed to do, in my opinion, to share this concern and this desire. With all due respect to the board, we had at least at one point a $1.8 million budget cap. The board's priority was trying to fund the fire department. I know 17,000 over the course of $100+ million may seem small to some people, but we were really trying to reduce the impact on the town departments and trying to achieve the board's #1 objective, which was increased staffing in the fire department. Joe did do everything any select board member should be doing. So I just want to be clear on that.
And Joe, I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. I was just making the point. I haven't heard about this before, and I'm just wondering if, as a stopgap measure, whether there might be, some, local charitable resource that might be able to help those folks in particular who, have a need. If there might be something we can do in that way. You mentioned the Scouts earlier, and they're always a great resource, or community chest. So there may well be, I think it's great that Chris will have the discussion with DPW, but maybe there's some creative ways in the community that we can help those, particularly our seniors who may need help.
Thanks, Marion.
Yeah,
So,
you bet.
Madam
And thanks.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
So one of the problems that I've experienced at my own house, and I've talked to Joe about this, is during the summer, you have grass clippings that end up in a barrel. And those can be pretty ripe by the time they get picked up in October. I think that's part of the problem. And there's also an issue in those barrels. Those barrels can get somewhat warm from a spontaneous combustion. So you need to be careful with it as moving forward. Am I wrong, Joe?
No, I'm just thinking about your hay days in the barn.
Yeah, I grew up in a farm, and we used to have to salt the hay if it was damp, if we put it in a silo, because we didn't want a fire.
Yeah.
So
I just have to say one thing here. I understand the misunderstanding. Rob, you're telling me in October, and now I see you're right. But when I mentioned it to Chris, oh no, we'll talk about that in January. So now I see the dichotomy there, and I'll try to be a little
more. With all due respect, we did talk about it. We talked about your last meeting in January. We talked about the budget cap, and that's also an opportunity where the board could have discussed it. I know you weren't part of the budget steering group, Joe, but you certainly will be next year. And then you'll certainly get more information at that time through that process.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
While I respect the question and the request from the community, I encourage Chris to pursue it with Todd to see if there's a way to find a plausible way to accommodate but we're spending a whole lot of time on a $17,000 discussion relative to a $122 million budget. I've got a couple other questions that I'd like to be able to put to Stephanie and Chris, please.
Yeah. Joe, I think we can move on from this. Go ahead, Rob.
So as we look at the overall budget, and I think one of the things that you highlighted was a 6.7% increase in public safety. I know there are desires to get to certain staffing levels. Can you talk to me about, of that 6.7, how much is due to what we're already putting into the fire department in terms of both the additional 2 folks as well as the contractual obligations?
Yes, of course. So that 6.7% you referenced is the total overall increase for public safety. So that dollar numbers equates to 722,000. About 580,000 of that is just for the fire department. So if we sort of back into that, $250,000 of that increase is due to the 2 new positions, as well as an increase in overtime budget. About 160,000 of it is due to sort of the baseline COLA, which we call a cost of living adjustment, plus their annual step increases that all FTEs receive. And then other additions to the contract. So FY25 is the first year that the contract that was negotiated is really hitting the budget. So it includes everything that was negotiated during that contract, including education incentives, changes to certain stipends around EMTs and paramedics. And then also, if the board will remember, there was also the negotiation of promoting 4 firefighters to lieutenants. So we're also absorbing that cost of about $55,000 for the first time in this FY25 budget. Does that answer what you're looking for? Okay.
Yep. And then this is sort of a nit, but it was something that jumped out at me as I get down into sort of the DPW's review of the various buildings. I saw that electricity was budgeted flat for all the buildings except for the police department, which was up like 25% or something like that. Is that due to the charging stations? Like, because my expectation is the fleet hasn't changed, and we are going to eventually be charging the public for any usage on that. So what's the driver there?
No, it's a great question. It's not due to an impact of any charging stations. They're not seeing anything significant increasing on that side. Our director of that department was just bringing that budget up to baseline where it should be based on actual spending for the last 5 years. It's been under budgeted for a number of years, and he was just reevaluating where he could sort of spread his costs out, and that was one of them. He wanted to right size that budget. The police station, it's not expanding, there's nothing going on, it's just sort of been under budgeted for a number of years.
And a couple other places where I saw declines, and I don't know if you alluded to this before, there seemed to be on some of the building maintenance side of things, some reductions, and I just want to make sure that we're not deferring maintenance on things, because we have a requirement to maintain these buildings.
Yep, our facilities director did request a FTE in his department. It's HVAC technician. This was previously done with an electrician position where they brought it in-house. He just wanted to make sure, again, we had a number of departments, probably 5 or so, request new FTEs in their budget. He came in with his own funding source saying, I will reduce the repairs and maintenance side of all building budgets and reduce our contracted services for HVAC in order to have this position come in-house.
Great, thank you. That was okay. Let me just see. There was one other one that I had to just want to. So there was a significant reduction in our veteran services. I just want to make sure that I understand and the public understands that we're not sort of abdicating our advocacy on behalf of our veterans.
Nope, it's a great question. We are not. There used to be about 50% of an FTE in the veteran services budget. We were doing those benefits in-house. That has since been regionalized to a service. Molly, I'm so sorry, the name just went out of my head. West Suburban Veteran Services. And we have an agent that handles those services for us. We just pay an assessment fee to them. there's no effect on our residents. We're still providing all the same services and benefits that we were before.
Okay. And on the general government side, that some of the cuts that you talked about, can you just elaborate, give some examples of the types of things that were cut?
Sure, we have a outside professional services budget that we cut. We have a training budget. Unfortunately, it just might mean that certain individuals on the general government side might not be able to take certain courses or do trainings. We also reduced our newspaper budget, which might just mean we have to bring more of those services to the digital side of things. It's all just on the sort of administrative side of
So
our
like on the training and
resources.
professional development side and travel related to that, you brought
Yep.
those things down. Okay, those seem
Yes.
like very reasonable places to cut in order to maintain frontline services.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. By the way, great job with you and your team to get it to the level funding.
Thank you.
Joe, do you have anything further at this point?
My head's ready to explode. I've learned so much tonight. I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Well, I think that, you know, what we have seen, and again, Stephanie, thank you, and Chris, is that we have a budget where we've either level funded or made cuts as necessary, largely with respect to the increase in the public safety, and in order to accommodate the 2 new positions for the fire department, but that it has taken a great deal of cutting in other areas in order to make that happen, and also not funding other positions that have been requested in a number of departments throughout town. But this is what is a sustainable budget, and what can be done. It has been discussed with the fire department, and it is significant progress, although it's not what we had hoped to do. But this is what we can do within the constraints we have as a sustainable, working toward a sustainable budget. At this point, I want to bring in some of the public comments that we have. So let me read these. Kathy Wallace, 283 Farm Lane. Westwood needs 11 firefighters per working group. The 2013 and 2023 studies corroborated the need for 11. The staff of 11 should be funded to a minimum of 10 firefighters at all times through overtime. Why does the proposed FY25 budget not include this as a public safety priority? 1, without a minimum of 10 firefighters, we cannot run the second ambulance, and/or we lose the engine or ladder truck if both ambulances are responding to calls. 2, when the FY24 budget was being determined last year, the same question was raised, and the response was that we needed to wait for the results of the operational study. 3, we now have the 2013 and 2023 studies that both recommend that we need a minimum of 11. 4, no staff were added to the fire department in FY24. There has been significant growth in town. Chief Lund made a fiscally responsible request to add 4 firefighters in FY25. In reality, we need more than 11, as detailed in the studies. Taxes went up significantly this year. How can there be no funding for the 2 additional positions to bring us to the recommended minimum of 11 firefighters? And then to conclude this from Kathy, the town received an additional $3.75 million in funding from the MSBA for the Pine Hill project in December 2023. In 2022, the town approved $4.1 million in funding above what town meeting approved for the school project. Is the reason that we can't afford firefighters due to the cost of the Pine Hill School? Why can't some or all of the $4.1 million be reauthorized by new votes of the select board and/or school committee? There was a recent tragedy in Winthrop resulting in the loss of life of a 2-year-old child, and no ambulance was available. I urge the town to truly make public safety a priority, and fund the 4 new firefighters to achieve 11 in each working group and staff to 10 firefighters 24/7. I think we've discussed, Kathy, the great efforts that have been made, and the progress that this budget will make to firefighter staffing, the fire department staffing. And this is a continued priority of this board, to staff the fire department. And I know that we will be looking at all available funds and opportunities, to do so in the future, and including applying for the SAFER grant. And this remains a priority. As far as the money for Pine Hill, that money has been allocated to the Pine Hill project and cannot be reallocated to a different use.
Madam Chair, if I may on that.
Please.
Those are also capital funds, one-time capital funds that cannot be used to fill an operating budget gap. So
Correct.
that would not solve the problem.
Agreed. Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane, at the 1/22/24 Select Board meeting, the town administrator committed to providing an update on the SAFER grant application process. What is the current status of that? Chris, would you like to give us an update on that? I just alluded to the SAFER grant.
Yes, so I've been speaking with Chief Lund. He's identified a consultant that we're looking to work with. At this time, according to what I'm hearing from Chief Lund, is the application process has not opened yet. But we are certainly looking to bring back something to the select board with the process of working with a professional consultant to help us write the SAFER grant, so it's a more attractive application for the reviewers.
Thank you, Chris. Comment from Jason Hotra. I'm sorry, Kelly Hanoan, 145 Dealer Park Road. We would support additional yard pickups. We're not part of the number Joe referenced. And question from Michael Kraft, 30 Coach Lane. Is it possible that individuals could purchase extra pickups a la carte? Interesting question. I don't know the answer to that.
I could certainly add that to the list to discuss with Todd.
Great. Michael, we will discuss that. Kathy Wallace, 283 Farm Lane. When was the last time that ambulance fees were increased? I believe the fees total 1.6 million currently. An increase here could generate significant funds. Could we charge a resident rate and a higher mutual aid ambulance rate? I don't know when the ambulance fees were last increased. Moving on, Darren Mooney. Actually, this is getting into some other issues we're going to discuss. So I'm going to hold on to that comment because that's not on the topic we're discussing right now.
Point of order, Madam Chairman, you may want to get his address before reading his comments into the record at any point in time.
I'm sorry, Pat?
I don't think he's put his address in.
It's in there, Pat. It's 95.
It's in the first line of his write-up.
Yeah, I see it.
Mea culpa.
Yep.
Mea culpa.
He's on a topic that we haven't gotten to yet, so I'm not going to read that. So it'll be more relevant when we're talking about it. Okay. So at this point, we have the budget that has been in process for a great length of time, and we've discussed that process extensively, and we need to give our approval on that. Joe, Rob, any further thoughts?
If I recall hearing Stephanie correctly at the outset, it seems so long ago at this point, I believe there was something with respect to 3 capital items that you were going to suggest as budget articles 11 through 13. Am I remembering correctly?
You are. That specifically will be, I believe, part of the next agenda item. But yes, if you have any questions on those, please, I'm here to answer.
And I just want to make sure that we have consensus with respect to the operating budget.
The municipal budget, yep.
As discussed.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yep. Very good.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steph. All right, so I think we can move on now to a discussion of the 2024 annual town meeting articles. Chris, are you going to take us through this?
Sure. So we have, excuse me, as the board's aware, we have a total of 39 articles, which includes 10 miscellaneous articles. For this evening's, we have our traditional articles for our financial articles, budget 1 and budget 2, which are adjustments for the current fiscal year. We are not ready to make a recommendation on those articles as of yet. We do have budgets currently listed, budget 3 through 10, which is the operating budget, the municipal capital improvements budget, the school capital improvements budget, the sewer capital improvements budget, the additional capital improvements for ambulance, the additional capital improvements budget, and also the stabilization fund for FY25, along with the OPEB liability trust. Typically, outside of the numbers changing, budgets at this point, budget 3 through 10 are your annual budgets, budget accounts anyway, or topics that are going to be discussed. And as far as the select board budgets, we have 9. Excuse me, we have 10. Excuse me. We have I'm sorry. we have 12, but we have 3 for street acceptance. One's a portion of Ellis Street, the other one's a portion of Porter Street, and the other one is for Hedgerow Lane. Typically, just for the board's understanding, well, in the past, we've had some betterments that have been applied to street acceptances. We are not recommending any betterments for any 3 street acceptance. Reason being is it's a portion of Ellis Street. The majority of it's already been accepted, but there's a small portion that hasn't been accepted. There's a portion of Porter Street that has not been accepted. That one's slightly different. That one had some, there was a bond that was, it was a developer that did some work. The bond was released. This is prior, I forget what year it was released, but it was released. And we feel that it's because the bond expired, excuse me. I'm sorry, the bond expired. And there was some prior administration, there was a little bit of confusion with that. We have done some research on that. Pat has done a lot of research along with Nora on that. And the recommendation is that we feel that it is the town's responsibility in this case. And so there is some additional cost to do some of the work there, but that is something that would be done through the road enhancement projects through DPW. So we're not recommending a betterment on that property or that street. And then when it comes to Hedgerow Lane, that's a newer development that currently meets DPW street standards to be accepted. So there would be no additional cost needed there. The Select Board 4, I know Nora's here talking about the general bylaw amendment related to dog leash requirements. So we'd certainly like to just discuss that with the board a little bit right now. I know there's been a lot of talk in the community. There's been a little bit of confusion based on some of the things that some of the individuals that have contacted us between the Conservation Commission regulations and what this bylaw amendment is doing. So just going to ask Nora if she can just walk us through that and educate us all on what this bylaw amendment means.
Sure, I can do that. So this is essentially a public safety matter. There's been questions that have been raised about concerns people have had with dogs that are not well controlled, or dogs that are off leash and people who are encountering them believe are not well controlled. So there are 2 different issues, and I think they're being conflated here. So I'll discuss them both, but this matter is really just about the proposed general bylaw amendment. Last year, there was a request, several requests that went to the Conservation Commission to revise its regulations to change the manner in which dogs were permitted to be walked through conservation areas. The Conservation Commission discussed that at a couple of meetings. They had a meeting in June of 2023 where they went over proposed regulations. They adopted those regulations. They then held a public hearing to more appropriately adopt them in the course of a public hearing. They did that in November, I believe. And then soon after that, they put up signs in the conservation areas. The Conservation Commission's regulations used to say the dogs had to be leashed or controlled, and they changed the regulations to say the dogs must be leashed and controlled when on conservation properties. They did that to prevent unfortunate incidents between dogs, dog walkers, other people just walking through the area and other people's dogs. They also did it so that they could, in the Conservation Commission members' opinion, protect and adequately care for the conservation areas. So that was an issue. The Conservation Commission took the advice of anyone who came to either the June meeting or the November meeting and decided to adopt these regulations. While they were doing that, there were discussions that came about at the request of a police officer to propose changes to the general bylaw to bring that more into conformance with the Conservation Commission's regulations. So what we have is we have a general bylaw that regulates animal control in Westwood, specifically the control of dogs. And that bylaw lists a number of areas, public properties, where dogs should be controlled. It specifically lists public parks. It does not list conservation areas within that. I believe when it was written many years ago, public parks was intended to refer to publicly owned land. It refers to fields, school facilities, and public parks. And I think the thought was that that included conservation areas. But because there was a concern that that might be unclear, the request was to revise the general bylaw to specifically include conservation areas within this, to impose a leash requirement, not just that requiring that dogs be leashed or under control, but just like the Conservation Commission had done in its regulations, to now require that dogs be leashed and under control. There was also discussion about extending this not just to the school properties, fields, public properties, parks, and conservation areas, but also to include streets and sidewalks. And it was with the intention of just making our public areas, including streets and sidewalks, as safe as possible for people and their dogs to walk on. So the general bylaw has been proposed with these changes in mind. When we were looking over the language of the general bylaw, we also discovered that state law requires a certain minimum fine for violation of dog control bylaws, and the Town of Westwood's bylaw is inconsistent with the state law. Our fines that are listed in that law are too low. And so another reason for putting forth this general bylaw is to bring the fines into conformance with state law. So it would do three things. It would raise the fines to the amount that the state law requires. It would expand the control of the bylaw to all town properties, including streets, sidewalks, and conservation areas. And instead of requiring dogs to simply be under the control of their walkers, they would have to be both leashed and under control of the walkers. So that's what we have so far. I have draft language that I can show you if you'd like me to share my screen and show that. The language has not been fully vetted. It's still being discussed by town council and by the police chief. But we do have a start. If you'd like to go through it, I'm happy to do that. So just let me know how much detail you want to go into tonight.
Nora, just thank you very much for that. Could you just clarify, when it comes to conservation land, who has the authority to issue regulations with respect to conservation land in Westwood?
That is fully within the authority of the Conservation Commission. That is not up to the Select Board. The Select Board can impose additional rules and regulations on all public property. They can address additional fines under a general bylaw, but that doesn't negate or interfere with the Conservation Commission's control of its own property. So they have the ability, Conservation Commission under a different section of state law has the ability to direct, manage, and control its own properties, and that's what its regulations do. They also have the ability to issue fines independently of the police and the animal control officer.
Thank you. Questions, comments, Joe, Rob?
None for me.
I guess I have one, Nora. Define for me under control.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons that the request was to change it from leashed or under control to leashed and under control. The thought there is that if a dog is on a leash, and in this case, the draft that we have so far of the bylaw requires that that leash be no longer than 10 feet, and could be argued that the leash needs to be shorter than that. The idea is if you're actually physically holding that dog by a leash, they're more likely to be under your control than if they are not leashed. Now, there are plenty of dogs in town that do not need leashes to be under control. They are obedient, they follow their owner's commands, either voice commands or in some cases electronic commands, and they don't need to be leashed. There are others that do. And I think the problem has been that people have encountered dogs that are off leash, whose owners believe they are more capable of controlling the dogs than they actually are. And there have been some incidents, and there have been some potential incidents where people have been concerned. So I have no personal experience with this, so I'm just relaying to you what has been brought to my attention and what the Conservation Commission were told at their hearing.
I guess that one of the follow-ups to that, though, is, if someone feels like a dog is out of control, even though it's leashed, what then carries the day? What actually determines whether or not the dog? I mean, it sounds like some of that is length of leash, but I've seen dogs that are pandemic puppies that are not as well socialized and therefore get a little more aggressive as they walk past other dogs. So who's defining control?
So physical control, I think, is part of it. So if you have your dog on a leash and that dog is, because you have them on the leash, is unable to reach another person or another animal, then they are physically under your control, whether they're barking, lunging, or showing signs of aggression. If you can hold them back and prevent them from interacting with a person or animal, then I would say they are under control. But the language of the bylaw you can look at the language and decide how you want to determine that. It's a little bit more difficult when the dog is not physically leashed.
Nora, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Joe.
I was surprised at the 10-foot, and then because most of the towns have a 7-foot leash requirement. Can that be revisited?
Absolutely can. The 10 feet was at the suggestion of the police chief, and it could certainly be revisited. I think he threw that out as an example.
If you look at other towns, they say 7 foot, which kind of follows up with what Rob was asking as well. 10 foot's a long line, especially if you're riding a bicycle.
Let me bring in some of the comments we're getting from folks on this issue. So first comment from Darren Mooney, 95 Lakeshore. I am disappointed with the proposed amendments to Chapter 184 and the signs abruptly posted in Lowell Woods concerning dogs. Like many neighbors, my dog greatly benefits from being able to stretch his legs and get up to a full sprint off leash. To that end, my dog has greatly benefited from living in local communities that successfully maintained green dog programs. These denoted certain public spaces as being open to controlled, off-leashed dogs to those residents participating in the program. During certain hours, residents who wished to avoid off-leashed dogs could do so by not attending certain parks at certain times. Has the board looked into the efficacy of such programs here in Westwood? They seem to meet the needs of all residents And he goes on to say, none of the Conservation Commission meeting notices for the June and November 2023 mentioned the dog issue. That is patently unfair. Before completely eliminating off-leash dogs in all but private land in our suburban community, has the town considered alternative solutions? This seems like a rash response to a small yet loud minority. Let me just go on.
So
I'm
I
sorry.
can answer to a certain extent, as far as a dog park or dog run area. The town doesn't currently have one. The general bylaw amendment is developed with an exclusion for a dog park. So if the town was able to create one, dogs would be permitted to be within that dog park off leash. They would still need to be under the control of their owners, but they could be off leash. So we have looked at properties before. There are several properties in town that people currently use as if they're dog parks, although they are not. They have not been designated as dog parks. And in fact, some of them are specifically excluded from the use of dogs. Many of our school properties are used by some residents to run their dogs, especially the fenced-in baseball fields. We see that on occasion. Another example is Buckmaster Pond area. A lot of people run their dogs at Buckmaster Pond. It's not designated for that, but it has been used that way in the past. Whether the town wants to develop a dog park and where it will be developed, I think that's a conversation to be had. The Conservation Commission has made it clear that at this point, it is in their opinion the best policy to restrict dogs within conservation lands. So if there was a place that would be set aside as a dog park, it would likely not be a conservation land.
Thank you, Nora. We do have a number of other comments on this, so I'll need to read them. I would just urge folks, if things start to get repetitive, please bear that in mind so that we're not being repetitive with our comments. This is from Kevin Liu, 71 Buckboard Lane. Hi, I've been living in Westwood for over 15 years. Regarding dog walking rule, to my knowledge, many surrounding towns dedicate areas for dogs to go off leash. For example, Dedham, Sharon, Randolph, Wrentham, Franklin, and many others. My question is, does Westwood offer such a facility? My point is, without offering a workable solution to dog owners using Lowell Woods, the more restrictive rule is making negative impacts on the lives of many Westwood dog owners and their lovely dogs, and most likely going to create more problems than it was meant to address. If in doubt, just take a moment and read the many thoughtful comments from some of the 500 plus people who signed the petition on change.org. I sincerely and respectfully ask the board to consider dismissing the new dog walking rule and restoring the previous rule. Thank you. Let's see. This comment from Melissa McDonough, 280 Burgess Ave. Is there no maximum being proposed then in terms of number of dogs that can be walked when leashed? Nora, do you want to take that one?
Sure. The draft amendment to the general bylaw does not have a limit on how many dogs can be leashed. The Conservation Commission restrictions does have a limit of how many dogs can be walked by any one person on conservation land. That limit is 2. But the general bylaw would not have a limit. So dogs could be walked on sidewalks, on streets, on public parks, without limit to the number of dogs per person. It would simply, if this bylaw goes forward as drafted, they would simply have to be leashed and under control.
Thanks, Nora. Next comment from Julie Bride, 20 Whitney Ave. How does the town expect to oversee the leash law? The dog officer, police, we have residents videotaping and bullying others right now, and it's causing a safety issue. Nora, can you speak to that as far as
Well, I can say that the general bylaw, the way it's currently written, gives the responsibility to the animal control officer, and the proposed amendments also give the enforcement to the animal control officer, the police chief, or the chief's designee. So the status would really remain the same, although it said the current law says animal control officer. I think adding those designee language is just making it more broad. There was a period of time where I believe we were without an official animal control officer, and there was another police officer that was enforcing it. And I believe the reason this is before the select board to consider is that the police who were enforcing that found that they were having interactions that required significant enforcement. And they asked for an amendment that might better enable them to do their jobs.
Thank you, Nora. Comment from Mike Volpe, 26 Delapa Circle. Clarification. So if these changes pass, then the Conservation Commission could allow off-leash dog walking if they wanted to. Could they overrule this new bylaw? PS, under control is defined in Chapter 184 bylaw.
The Conservation Commission's jurisdiction is different than the general bylaw. So if town meeting voters approve changes to the general bylaw, and those changes are as drafted with an exception to allow a dog park, and if the Conservation Commission decides to develop a dog park on conservation lands, then dogs could be kept off leash within that dog park. That's not something that's been discussed yet by the Conservation Commission.
I do see some comments from folks, but without addresses. So unfortunately, we're unable to read those. One from Patricia Kingsbury, 86 Clapper Tree. It is my understanding only 2 people complained. Nora, you said there were less than 10. How can you change the rules from on leash or under control to all must be leashed? It's proven it's less healthy for the dogs.
So I did not state that there were less than 10 complaints. I think what Patricia is referring to is a conversation I had with her husband, who asked how many people personally complained to me. And I told Andy that I did not know exactly how many people. I was not making a list, but I believed it was fewer than 10. I believe there were also complaints received by the police, by the conservation agent, and by the town administrator. I don't have a number of how many complaints there were.
Okay. And we're going to have to wrap this up soon, folks, because we have other agenda items. Peter Schuler, 779 Gay Street, asked how many injuries have been reported in the Lowell Woods area in the last year. I have concern about the $500 fine proposed for a violation and the direction by the Conservation Commission to get the police involved. Another question about have there been dog bites in Westwood? How many? Were they on leash or off leash?
All of those are questions for the police department. I don't have answers.
Okay. Serena Barkley, 15 Cardinal Ave. Is it this board's understanding that the Conservation Committee posted proper and informed notice of its process to change to the regulations? Pat, are you able to provide some clarity on that? Oh, you're on mute, Pat.
Sorry, I have no knowledge that they did not properly post their meeting and advertise their agenda. I've not gone back to review their agendas. If that's something the board wants me to do, I will, but I have no knowledge that it was improperly done.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, a couple more here. Jason Hostra again, 145 Dealer Park Road. We respectfully propose that we allow walkers at Lowell Woods with dogs to be either on leash or under control. In addition, we respectfully propose that commercial dog walkers not have a limit on the number of dogs they can bring to Lowell Woods, provided that they are registered with the town and are on leash. Control can be given a definition, for example, under voice command. Finally, please do not limit the leash length to such a small length. We would certainly have different requirements on public streets than in land like Lowell Woods. the changes the Conservation Committee wants to make seem like we're trying to blow out a single candle with a fire hose. And again, I just want to reiterate that the Conservation Commission has statutory authority with respect to our conservation land, much like our Board of Health has statutory authority delegated to it through the Department of Public Health. So that is not within the purview of the Select Board. And then hopefully to finish this up, Kathy Kelleher, 24 Sherman's Way. This impacts a significant number of Westwood residents. No one was aware that the Conservation Commission was holding that meeting. Therefore, we were not given a representative voice. All right. Michael Kraft, 30 Coach Lane. I was of the understanding that the bylaw was also going to address professional dog walkers and possible registration slash licensing of same. Will there be rules surrounding that issue?
The general bylaw is not drafted to require any licensing or permitting for commercial dog walkers. The Conservation Commission's restrictions do have such a requirement.
Thank you, Nora. Emar Chi, 29 Fox Meadow Drive. Control is subjective. Not allowing your dog off leash when they've been used to being off leash is like taking your kids to the playground and not allowing them in the swings. Let's see. Okay. I think at this point,
Madam Chair,
yeah, go ahead.
while we're entertaining, I mean, certainly, I am sympathetic to a number of the comments that are made here. And, I think as you highlight, there is a distinction between the bylaw and the conservation land. And as Nora highlighted earlier, there are parcels in town that have maybe historically been used for dog run areas. So I guess is one of the possible solutions to this, finding a way to find a parcel that we could, that is in our care, custody, and control that could be converted to a dog park. That doesn't solve the problem in Lowell Woods because that's under the care, custody, and control of the Concom, but at least it tries to find a solution because, I hear and agree with many of the comments that are made here with respect to leashes and control.
I think that's an excellent question. Perhaps that's a discussion that we should have. At the moment, we're talking about this bylaw, but I think it is this conversation and the feedback we're getting is heightening the awareness as to community desire for something like that, particularly given the new regulations vis-a-vis Lowell Woods. Let me just get through. I have a few more comments to read, and then we are going to have to move on, folks, on our agenda. Julie Bride, 20 Whitney Ave. Does the Conservation Commission have jurisdiction under current bylaws to restrict dogs or animals within conservation land? I don't see anything under Chapter 392. My understanding, Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, the Conservation Commission has the authority to protect that land.
It's under the custody and control of the Conservation Commission, and I believe they have the authority to promulgate rules how it's used. I don't know of anything that prevents them from doing that at this point in time.
All right. John and Lisa Capone, 27 Fox Meadow Drive. How many police reports have been filed because of a dog? This will put dog walking companies out of business by limiting to 2 dogs. How was the 2-dog limited chosen? 4-dog limit seems like a good compromise. A leash limit is silly. Patricia Kingsbury, 86 Clapper Tree, Lowell Woods is perfect as it is for dog owners. It's better for their mental and physical health. No evidence has been brought forth to show the rule should be changed other than perhaps limiting professional dog walkers. Please do not make a unilateral decision without seeking more input, as many want to work out a reasonable solution. Again, I think some of these questions are directed toward the Conservation Commission and others to the bylaw we're talking about tonight. Questions about Lowell Woods, again, directed to the Concom. Tammy McDonald, 16 Hawk Tree Drive. I agree with Mr. Mooney and would like to add that dog parks are contained areas for dogs to socialize and do not provide the same opportunities for exercise. I own 2 Labradors that need to run. I ask the quote, leash or under control, close quote, language be used in the bylaw. Okay. Ralph Yeager, 401 Sandy Valley Road. He writes, this is about the safety of our residents, children, and elderly. This must have priority over dogs. Okay. A lot of the comments I'm seeing here are from folks who have already contributed and are repetitive. There's one question here. Darren Mooney, 95 Lakeshore, will the board please address whether or not it will consider a program whereby certain parks are designated for permissible off-leash activity during certain times? This generates small revenue and allows for controlled activity to known participating residents. There's information on Brooklines. I think that again, this is heightening the discussion. This is not something we're going to solve tonight, clearly. We've got to discuss the bylaw at hand. I'm certainly open to having a further conversation. I understand the Concom has indicated that it will be having a further conversation on this. So perhaps after that has been revisited, that it would make sense for the board to have further conversation. Irene
Chair, can I just ask one other thing?
Yeah,
Would
sure.
it be possible to have the Concom come before us as well? Because I think it would be beneficial, as we are the elected body and that we appoint them, that they come before us and have the opportunity to hear from the residents as well. So I from my perspective, I'm interested in what these folks have to say, but we don't really have any control other than the appointments with respect to Concom. So, I'd be very interested in what their point of view is and have them come before us to justify the changes.
Fair point. I don't see why not. Let me just continue with these comments so we can move forward here. We're still talking about the warrant. We've got some other articles we've got to discuss. Irene Brennan, 22 Winter Street. I would echo the earlier comments and urge the dismissal of this proposal pending further discussion. We have another resident, strike it. Suzanne Kogan, 984 High Street. Can a conservation committee rule be regulated by the police? Bram Fusco, 20 Pine Lane, the 5 acres we own behind First Parish might be a good option temporarily until the high school decides to put this land to use. Andrew Miller, 211 Fox Hill Street. The information presented about the number of complaints seems sparse at best. Please do not adopt any changes to the rules without further review and public hearing. I haven't heard of any of the public comments being made in favor of these changes. My question is, how and when will this body make a decision with what appears to be overwhelming public resistance to adopting a leash law? I guess I would say we have a leash law in town. This bylaw is expanding that with respect to make sure that it also includes streets and sidewalks, which it currently does not, as well as to make it consistent with what is now the rule, the regulation with respect to Lowell Woods, which again is under the authority of the Conservation Commission. I'm finishing this up. Helen, okay. Helen Roberts, 2 Fox Meadow Drive. Thank you. Please let us be heard. And Melissa McDonough, 280 Burgess Ave. Does the select board have control if the Conservation Committee did not comply with the notice requirement? Pat, I'll direct that inquiry to you, and that's, I'm finished with the comments here.
Yeah, so if there is a notice requirement and someone feels offended by it, the proper place for, I think, to adjudicate that would be with an open meeting law complaint. The problem is those are probably timed out from you have to file them. I think it's within 30 days. Don't quote me on that, but there's a certain time period that they have to file an open meeting law complaint, and I think it's probably passed. If the board wants, I'll go back and take a look to see if it was properly noticed, and I'm happy to report out if it was or wasn't to the select board, if that's what they want me to do.
I think given the concerns that have been raised, that's warranted, Pat. Thank you.
Happy to do it.
Okay. Let me ask my colleagues, any further comments on the dog bylaw amendment?
None from me.
I've said what I'm gonna say.
Okay. I think we can move on to our other articles. I think this brings us to you, Steph, again. And before we move on, I do just want to say thank you to all of the residents for their comments. This was a very helpful discussion. And actually, Nora, let me just conclude that. Sorry. I know that this article is still being drafted. Can you just explain to us what we can expect with the language of this moving forward?
So as I start out my discussion, this is a public safety article. It is not a community development article. So I have been working with Pat Ahern and with Chief Silva on getting the drafting of this, just so that it can go forward to be considered along with all your other warrant articles. I think I need to leave it to Jeff and to Pat to finalize the drafting. And I think it would be helpful. I know as Board Member Gotti suggested that the Conservation Commission come in and discuss this with you. I think it would be very helpful to have the Animal Control Officer and representative of the Police Department discuss this with you, because that's where this bylaw amendment originated.
So, Madam Chairman, if I may.
Please.
So I agree with what Nora just said. And my part in the drafting of this is to try and make sure it complies with the provisions of Chapter 184, which is looking to invoke. So I'm happy to take another look at that if that's what the board wants. But I also want to say that this is kind of what bylaw making is proposals are made and they're openly discussed and they're amended and they're changed. And eventually we get to a point where there's consensus. And I think that's some of what we've seen here tonight.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, Stephanie, sorry, handing it back to you.
Great, thank you. My piece is just requesting that the board accept 3 of our currently miscellaneous articles to become budget articles. So that would be using miscellaneous articles 1, 2, and 3 to create budget articles 11, 12, and 13. And I had briefly given an overview of this earlier in the night, but just to recap, the first budget article 11, so the first borrowing article we call it, would be for the $750,000 appropriation for a fire squad truck borrowing. This would be to a vehicle to replace Squad 1. The second one would be to use $2.5 million for the high school roof restoration project. The school had submitted this request based off of a roof moisture study that they had done for a number of schools in the beginning of 2023. And this project would fund a roof restoration at the high school, which would yield a 20+ year warranty against leaking roofs, and then allow the district to defer a new code compliant roof assembly that would be estimated to cost $7 to $8 million. So it's investing in that roof to put off sort of having to do a larger capital investment. The third article for borrowing would be $1.5 million on that Conant Road culvert project that we discussed earlier. This is just being moved up from a request that was put in the 5-year capital budget in FY26 so that we can take advantage of a 75% reimbursable grant for that project that the DPW director is in the process of applying for.
Thank you, Steph. Any questions or comments from my colleagues?
One on that last point, Stephanie. I know Todd's in the process of applying for that grant. Probability on securing?
He's received good word that it's a very high likely chance that we'll get it. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have any problem accelerating, asking for that 1.5 appropriation when we can get 75% of it back.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a definite need that would have been coming in the next budget cycle anyways.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steph. We've got a couple other articles to talk about, weights and measures.
Yes, Madam Chair. At your last meeting, the board authorized us to enter into an agreement with Norfolk County for Norfolk County to be the provider of services for the seal of the weights and measures for the town of Westwood. One of the other things through that research that we found, similar to what we were talking about with a previous agenda item, the fee structure for these services has not been, well, I'll certainly turn it over to Nora, but one of the things with the fee services is currently the state laws for services is exceptionally low. We were previously working with the Commonwealth who's providing these services at a very low cost to the town, so we did not pass those fees on to the users. The Commonwealth did increase their fees significantly. We still didn't pass those fees on to the users. We're at a point now where we're looking to establish a fee structure that's above the current general laws, which is very low. And we're looking to bring that in over a 4-year period, beginning in fiscal year 24. Nora, I don't know if there's any greater detail that you'd like to add to that.
You're on mute.
Nora.
Sorry about that. The state law has fees that were established many years ago. They're exceptionally low and they would not be worth the cost of collecting them. Most towns establish their own fees. And so the proposal here is for Westwood to establish fees that are reasonable and actually comport with the actual cost of sealing the weights and measures devices.
Thank you. Okay. So we have a recommendation to add a number of the articles that we've discussed tonight.
Yes, Madam Chair, can I just make sure we're clear on one thing or two?
Sure.
More things?
Yes.
One is, as part of this recommendation for this to establish this fee structure, we are recommending to the board to use miscellaneous article number 4, not to confuse anything, to create select board article 13. Not a budget article, but select board article 13 for the weights and measures fee structure. And then we're also recommending to the board to authorize us to forward to the planning board the 3 streets for the street acceptance.
Thank you very much, Chris. With that, and if there isn't any further discussion or questions from my colleagues, I will take a motion.
Okay, I think I have this all straight. So I make the motion that the select board vote to use miscellaneous article 1 to create budget article 11, which is the appropriation of $750,000 for the fire squad truck borrowing. Should we do these all together, or do we want to take them one by one?
One by one?
I'm in favor of all together.
No, take them one by one. That way they're concise.
Agree. Do we have a second on that, Joe?
Second, sorry.
That's all right. Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
All right, next I move the select board to vote to use miscellaneous Article 2 to create budget Article 12 for the appropriation of $2.5 million for the high school roof restoration borrowing.
Second.
Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Next, I move the select board vote to use miscellaneous Article 3 to create budget Article 13, which is the appropriation of $1.5 million for the Conduit Road culvert construction borrowing.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Next, I have moved the select board to vote the use of miscellaneous Article 4 to create select board Article 13, weights and measures fee structure.
Second.
Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
And lastly, that the select board requests that the planning board include the 3 street acceptances on Ellis Street, Porter Street, and Hedgerow Street on a future planning board meeting for review and recommendation for the 2024 annual town meeting.
Second.
Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you. I'm not going to reopen the discussion on the dog amendment, but a resident, I did see another message come through. Suzanne Cogan, 984 High Street. How will residents get to vote on the article once it's drafted? So this will be going to annual town meeting, which is on May 6th. So that is where residents will have the opportunity to vote on the proposed bylaw amendment. And we hoped to see everybody at our annual town meeting. Okay, with that, our next agenda item is a discussion regarding House Bill 3789, an act amending the Charter of Westwood regarding town treasurer and tax collector. Pat, can you take us through this, please?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So if you recall, a year ago at town meeting approved the a charter change to have the town treasurer and town tax collector appointed by the town administrator. Counsel for the Senate contacted us and recommended that we change some of the language in our proposal. It doesn't change it substantively, but it puts it in a way that they would like to see it. We've had Lauren Goldberg, who's special counsel on this, and Dottie, please disagree with me if I misspeak something. We've reviewed this, and we believe it carries out the intent of the original town meeting article, and recommend that you make a motion and adopt that language as a proper change so that the Senate can consider this moving forward.
Thank you, Pat. Dottie, anything to add?
I agree with Pat. It's very insignificant.
Yeah, I think it's a stylistic change. It's not a change in content. Any questions or comments, Joe, Rob?
None.
I will entertain a motion on it.
I move that we amend the language as proposed or as suggested.
I'll second that.
All right, roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Excellent. So now we're moving on to new business. And we have our town clerk, Dottie Powers, with us to give us an update on the 2024 election schedule and voting by mail postcard. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen.
It was in the news today, Dottie, that many town clerks in Massachusetts have been inundated, and I think you fall into that category as well.
Yes, we're getting daily many vote by mail cards. I'm just going to go through this with you, though. The presidential primary will take place Tuesday, March 5th, and there are a few voting options for voters. First one, in person on election day. All voting takes place in the gymnasium at Westwood High School, 220 Nahan Street. There are 5 precincts in the polling location. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. Upon arrival, if you're unsure of your precinct, there will be a greeter that will direct you to the correct precinct. Next option would be vote by mail. The Secretary of the Commonwealth sent out vote by mail applications to every registered voter the first week in January. There were 2 different postcards sent out. The first, vote by mail application for voters who are registered in a party. Just as a reminder to people, when you get these cards, only that party ballot will be sent to the voter unless the voter makes a party change on or before February 24th and completes a new application. Now, we've gotten back these applications not signed, or people will cross out their party and put a different party ballot. We cannot do that by law. If you want a different ballot, again, you have to make that change and then fill out a new application. The second type of vote by mail application was for voters who are not registered in a party. They're unenrolled, which formerly was known as independent. So when you hear independent, it's really unenrolled. We've had people that are changing their voter party, and they're changing to, there's something called independent first party, and that is a political designation. It's not a party. So although you've seen many advertisements and it's been referred to as independent, it's not independent. It's unenrolled, and that does not mean that you're not a registered voter. What you have to do when you receive this card is you have to choose a party ballot before returning the application. And the party choices are listed right on the application: Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian. And again, we're getting these back. People are just checking off all elections and not putting anything for a party. So what's happening here is it's creating a lot more work for the staff. We've got about 200 cards right now where we have to send letters to everybody and remind them that if they want a ballot, they have got to return this form that we're sending them and let us know what party ballot to send. The common mistakes that are occurring on vote by mail postcards or applications. So again, I'll say it again. If the following criteria is not met, the voter's application will be rejected and a ballot will not be sent out. No voter signature. Voter did not check off the election. Unenrolled voter, again, formerly known as independent, has to choose a party ballot for the presidential primary on March 5th and also the state primary on September 5th. If not, a ballot will not be sent. But what we're doing is we're trying to help our voters, and we are, as best as we can, we're trying to get everybody out a letter that says you're not going to get a ballot unless you return the form designating what ballot you want us to send you. You cannot request a different party ballot without changing. So once you send an application and you've decided what party that you want us to send you, you can't then give us a call and just say, I want a different party ballot. You'd have to send in a new application. And again, if you want to change your party, you have to do it on or before February 24th. What can I do if I didn't receive a vote by mail postcard application in the mail? Either you apply online. The link is here, and I'll also have it on our website. You can download an application and mail or email it completed and signed to the town clerk at that email address. Or you can visit the town clerk's office and fill out an application. You can contact our office and we will mail you out one. Next option is early voting in person. We will be conducting early voting Early voting will begin on Saturday, February 24th. All early voting will take place in the Gillette Meeting Room at the Westwood Police Station. The first day on Saturday, we're going to have early voting from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday, February 26th will be the next day, 8 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, February 27th, 8 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. Wednesday, February 28th, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Thursday, February 29th, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And the last day for early voting in person will be Friday, March 1st from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. The last day to register to vote, and this is for anybody that is new to town. Just, one thing to remember, your voter registration doesn't move with you. You actually have to re-register in Westwood. If you're not registered, you've lived here for a long time, you want to vote, you're not registered, you need to register to vote. If you want to change your party, same thing applies. That will be Saturday, February 24th. We will have in-person registration until 5 p.m. at the town clerk's office. And you can also register online, and that's up until 11:59 p.m. And that's going to the Secretary of State's website. And again, if you go onto the town website, voting and elections, all of this information will be there for you. And that's it.
Dottie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And this is going to be a busy year for you and the clerk's office, and we truly appreciate all of your efforts to educate residents and to provide just the best customer service, if you will, to our residents. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next agenda item is an update from the Long Range Financial Planning Committee. And while this is a very important update, I'm going to suggest, given the hour, that we might defer that to our next meeting. Rob and Nora, if you're both amenable to that.
Fine
No
with me.
problem.
Okay. I want folks to watch that discussion and be able to participate in it. I saw the live version at the Long Range Financial Planning Committee. It's very valuable. So I think I want to make sure we all have the time for that. So let's defer that to our next meeting. And that brings us to our next agenda item, which is the fire chief recruitment process. Chris, I'll turn this over to you.
So I believe Molly's going to join me on this one.
Great.
So Molly, do you want to walk the board through the process?
Thank you both.
So as you know, mid-December, Chief Deckers resigned as the fire chief. He has been followed by Acting Chief Lund, and as Chris said in his update, Acting Assistant Chief McCarthy started as of yesterday. So now that we have the leadership of the department sort of reestablished on an acting basis, we're ready to move forward to find the permanent replacement. Doing a sort of back search of how things went down last time. So in 2017, Chief Scoville retired and an internal-external search was conducted. So what that means is there was a consultant hired who did focus groups in the community and with the department to see what they wanted in a new chief. The position was posted nationally across a number of mediums. A search committee was put together who did the original screening interviews. There were then 2 panel interviews, a written assessment, an assessment center, and the final 2 candidates were brought to the board. The board selected their preferred candidate. That candidate entered into contract negotiations with the town and then underwent a number of testing, physical testing, psychological testing, etc. So it's a very lengthy process. After reviewing that and sort of taking stock of what we know, what the community wants from the next chief and what the department wants from the next chief, we feel like we have a much better idea than we did in 2017. We also feel that we have a number of very qualified internal candidates who could step into that position. So at this point, it is Chris and my recommendation that we pursue an internal only search. So it would look somewhat similar to how things went down last time. It would be posted internally for a number of days. There would be 2 different panel interviews, one with public safety officials, police and dispatch, as well as fire representatives from other communities. a panel interview with other senior leadership in town to make sure that that person would fit into the management style. There would still be an assessment center, and the final candidate or candidates would be brought to the board for a final interview. And we would be saving time on the back end because the person would already be employed, we wouldn't have to do a physical test or a psychological evaluation. So I'm not saying we should do this as a time-saving procedure, though it would be significantly less time than doing an internal-external search. I think it really comes down to we have a number of highly qualified individuals within the department that we think could take over this role. But I'm happy to answer any questions or gain any feedback before we start that search.
Molly, thank you very much for giving us all of that history in the background. I think what you just said is extremely important, which is that we have highly qualified, excellent candidates within the fire department currently. I think given that, and also given where we've been, where we are, where we're going with the fire department, I am in favor of conducting the search internally. Let me open this up to my colleagues.
I concur, Marianne. I think we have some excellent candidates, and Molly gave a great synopsis. Thank you.
Yes, I concur. The only question that I have is, I mean, we have great candidates, absolutely. Would they not persevere through that process, I guess is my question.
You would always have the option to go external. So I guess the worst case scenario is that we would present a candidate or candidates to the board. And if the board felt that neither of those candidates was the right person to lead the department, we would then start over and do an external search.
Okay.
But for the record, I'm certainly in favor of sticking with the internal candidates.
We do have a comment on this from a resident, Kathy Wallace, 283 Farm Lane. I fully support promoting and hiring from within the department. Does each board member and the town administrator agree that there are several highly qualified internal candidates? Do you support hiring from within now and in the future, given that we currently have extremely qualified candidates? I ask each of you to comment on hiring now and in the future. Well, I think we've just done that. And I think what you've heard, what everyone has heard, is that we do all agree that we have extremely qualified candidates within the fire department. And we're going to vote on that in just a moment.
Further, I don't think we can comment on future hiring because we may or may not be board members at that time, and we can't bind a future board to how we feel about hiring in the future.
That's correct. We cannot bind a future board. Well, if there are no further questions or comments, I will entertain a motion on this.
I move that the select board proceed with the hiring process as laid out by Ms. King.
Second.
Roll call. Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Molly, thank you again. Thank you for all of your work on this, past, present, and future. Okay, moving on. We're on to old business, appointments and reappointments. Chris, can I turn this over to you?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, as the board is aware, we did have a vacancy on our Board of Health. It was posted on the website for 14 days. We had one applicant. The team that consisted of meeting with this applicant and speaking with this applicant consisted of the chair of the Board of Health, our Director of Health, Jared Orsini, Select Board member Joe Privatera, and myself. And it was unanimous recommendation from that group to this board to recommend Maureen White as a member of the Board of Health for her term to expire on June 30, 2026. Ms. White would be completing the term of the vacated member. That's why it's till June 30, 2026. And Joe was part of that, so I don't know, Madam Chair, if Joe has anything he'd like to add as part of that process.
I think she's a great candidate, Chris. I think we're very fortunate.
Well, she is a great candidate, and Maureen, we're delighted that you stepped up to serve in this position. If there's nothing else, Rob, we'll entertain a motion.
Certainly. I move the Select Board appoint Maureen White as a member of the Board of Health for a term to expire on June 30th, 2026.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call, Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you again, Maureen, for your service. Next agenda item, our regular meeting minutes from January 22, 2024. Are there any edits, additions? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Certainly. I move the Select Board approve the regular meeting minutes from our January 22nd, 2024 meeting.
I'll second the motion for the outstanding minutes.
Roll call, Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That brings us to public and press. I think I did see one more comment here. Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. What steps are being taken to accelerate the design, town meeting vote, and construction phases of this urgent project, which I believe is the Fire Station 1? Does Doran Whittier have a new timeline? Fran, as you heard earlier, or perhaps heard earlier, the RFQ is out for the OPM. That has been noticed with the deadline, and we expect to have a contract as per the schedule discussed at the special town meeting in March. So all of that is very much on target. Obviously, construction is not going to occur until a later town meeting authorizes construction. So we're in the design phase right now. I do not see any other public comments. We had quite a few tonight. And again, thank you to everybody who participated. Our next meeting will be on Monday, February 26, 2024 at 6 p.m. on Zoom. And with that, I will.
Excuse me, Mary Ann?
Yes.
I'm sorry. My invisible hand is up.
Oh, I'm so
no,
sorry.
No, it's my end. My end. Trying to fix it. I'm working on it. I spoke with Chris this afternoon about a couple of things, as you know, besides the yard waste. I did express an interest when I met with Stephanie and Chris back on, I'm not going to look up the date, but when I did express an interest in being on the fire department station work group. Chris informed me that there was another member of the board who was interested in that and that we could put it on our next agenda. I'm 99% certain that I will have Wi-Fi capabilities, but if I do not, I'm unable to sign in. I'd like to be part of that discussion about who's going to be on that work group. Could we postpone that till the next meeting? So it's the 26th that my fingers are crossed, and Tish said she'd help me on the Wi-Fi stuff.
So I think we can discuss it at the February 26th meeting.
But if I'm unable to sign in is what the courtesy that I'm asking for.
Oh, I see. Well, we want you to be at our meeting. Is there a question that you may not be able to attend, Joe?
Well, I won't be sitting with the background of the invisible hand. I'll be elsewhere, and I'm assured that the Wi-Fi will work. And
I hear you, Joe. You want to be a part of that discussion, and I want you to be a part of that discussion too. And hopefully, you'll be able to fully engage in that meeting. But yes, we'll accommodate that so you can be a part of that discussion whenever that takes place, but hopefully February 26th. How does that
Thanks.
sound?
Thank you very much.
You bet. With that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call, Joe.
aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you to all for the wonderful lesson tonight, especially you, Rob and Steph.
Have a good night, everybody.
You
Good
too.
night.
See you, Pat. Bye, Tish.